What is the most dangerous cult in D&D? Almost every single official adventure has one. And yet, for some reason, very few people use them to their full potential. Which is a shame, because a good cult is fuel for your campaign. They can corrupt beloved NPCs, turn a peaceful village into a nightmare, and make your players paranoid about every suspiciously friendly old man that they see. So today, we are shining a light on D&D's most criminally underused factions, and ranking the ones most likely to ruin your players' lives and destroy your campaign. Bonjour! Before we start talking about these walking red flags, I need to define what I mean by most dangerous cult. Because technically an angry toddler is dangerous, but so is a nuke. And I feel like there's a slight difference in between the two. For this video, the most dangerous cult is the one whose goal and steps to achieve those goals cause the most destruction. So for example, a cult that wants to enslave humanity is bad. It's very bad. But a cult that wants to kill everyone is worse. People can escape from tyrannical regimes. I live in Romania. I would know. But escaping from oops, everyone is dead is much harder to do. So coming at number 5 in the most dangerous cults of D&D, we are going to say hello to one of my favorite monsters, Demogorgon. He is a demon prince, representing savagery, destruction, and madness. You might recognize him from his cute face, he's got 2 of them, both constantly fighting for control. And that lovely gentleman has a cult, which reflects the same inner chaos. It is violent, unstable, and self-destructive. Just like my ex. To explain the cult of Demogorgon, we need to first understand what demons are. You see, demons and devils are 2 different things in D&D. Devils are lawful evil. They make contracts. They manipulate. They trick you into signing away your soul. Demons are the opposite of that. They are chaotic evil. If you show them a contract, they'll shove it down your throat, tie you up, light your house on fire, and then finally use your skull as a decorative cup. They don't make for great lawyers. And all those violent demons live in a place called France. No, they live in the Abyss. And the goal of this cult is to open a portal to the Abyss and follow it with a simple plan. Step 1, demons arrive. Step 2, everybody has a terrible afternoon. Step 3, there is in fact no step 3 because everyone is dead. And you might be thinking, that sounds awful. Why would anyone work with these bloodthirsty monsters? And you would be right, except I forgot to mention one thing. How this cult spreads. It usually starts with a strange 2-headed idol that someone becomes obsessed with. Then they develop a violent madness and begin to attack others. Arguments turn into fights and fights turn into murders. And before they know it, they've begun to serve Demogorgon. And the worst part? If the players are attacked by cultists and retaliate, they may soon find themselves attacking their own friends as well. A village touched by Demogorgon should feel like everyone is one bad moment away from stabbing each other with knives. You know, your average day in London. This makes the cult hard to run as a DM, but I have a couple of tricks to help you. More on that later. First, you need to know that because of their explosively violent nature, cults of the Demogorgon, according to the lore, are only found in remote places. Lost islands, ruined cities, abandoned prisons, that kind of thing. Which actually makes a lot of sense because if a bunch of lunatics try to attack a city, they'll quickly get the news. But in an isolated place, with no one to stop them, well, let's just say they're the perfect cult to use when your players are itching for some blood. I mean, in Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt, there's a cult of druid which chop off their own limbs to replace them with natural parts. And somehow they don't feel nearly as violent as those guys. By the way, if you want to use some messed up things for your D&D games, grab yourself Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt. I'll leave a link below. So, as promised, how do you run this cult as a DM? To run them, you can start with more subtle signs. After arriving to the island, the druid notices that the animals are tearing each other apart, and the villagers seem angry. Suddenly, a fisherman murders his own brother in an argument that he doesn't even remember. Every hour, the situation gets worse. The fights become more frequent, as if the violence was spreading like a disease. They keep exploring and find one of the cult sanctuaries, but it's disturbed and destroyed, as if someone already took care of the cultists. But then, why is the combat outside not stopping? By the time the party understands that, joke's on them, no one came before. Everything being destroyed and everyone dying is the ritual. The entire location is already coming apart and demons are pressing against the walls of reality. Because of the contagious aspect of Demogorgon's bloodlust, your players will have to play smart. They can't just kill everybody. They'll have to find ways to disable the enemies instead, either by tying them up or putting them to sleep. In my opinion, that's just enough of a switch up from classical D&D combat to keep it interesting. But the cult of the Demogorgon is last on this list for a reason. This madness makes them dangerous, but it also makes them unreliable. A Demogorgon cult can tear through a town and summon demons, and then it can collapse 30 minutes before the ritual achieves completion because the high priest thought that the second in command looked at him funny. And when your world-ending cult has serious chances of offing itself first, well, it can only rank so high. But the next cult does not have this problem. They are organized, they are patient, and worst of all, they know what they're doing. Coming at number 4, we have the cult of Vecna. This is probably the D&D cult that comes closest to a real-life cult, because it revolves almost entirely around one key figure. In the real world, we had the Manson family revolving around Charles Manson. In D&D, we have the cult of Vecna revolving around Vecna. The difference is that Charles Manson is just a dude, and Vecna can cast 9th level spells multiple times. Depending on which era of D&D your games take place in, Vecna can either be a lich, a demigod, or a god. But no matter the version, the core idea stays the same. Vecna is the patron saint of secrets, undeath, and forbidden magic. Vecna's cultists want secrets, especially the kind of secret that can destroy someone's lives or ruin a kingdom. And by gathering enough secrets, those cultists hope to help Vecna ascend, which is a problem, because Vecna doesn't care about being the king of the world. He was a king before he became a lich, and he got bored of that. No, what he wants to do is to rewrite the world with him at the center. And to make things worse, if Vecna does ascend, it will make rebellion impossible because he will know every secret. How are you supposed to plot against someone who already knows the plan, the members, the backup plan, and the meeting location? I'll explain that later. First, we need to understand the inner workings of this cult. Since they can deploy a level of surveillance that China and their social credit score could only dream of, they can attack the thing that players rely on the most: trust. A Vecna cultist doesn't need to roll for initiative because he'll ruin the party before combat has a chance to start. For example, a historical record changes in between 2 visits to the archive. Then, a secret the party has that they never told anyone gets them arrested. And finally, the key witness goes missing before he can testify. By that point, your players will feel like the walls have ears, because they do. And as a DM, that opens the door to one of my favorite things to do in D&D: random wisdom saving throws. Do not tell them what they're for. Just look at your player dead in the eye, tell him to roll a wisdom saving throw, and watch the table panic. Alternatively, you can also just pull the paladin aside and whisper something in his ear. And then the next session, the rogue hears a voice in his head. "The paladin knows you murdered his father. He told the guards. They're waiting outside the dungeon for you." And just like that, the seed of betrayal has been planted. And if the cultists can do that to your players, just imagine what they can do to the NPCs. Every time the party discovers something, it comes with a question. Did we discover this because we were clever, or because the cult wanted us to know? This makes the cult of Vecna amazing for long campaigns, especially ones where you sprinkle hints of their existence early and let the players realize that some of their victories may have been manipulated by someone else from the beginning. Vecna's plans tend to be meticulous, secretive, and incredibly long-term. I mean, he is a lich. He can't afford to wait centuries for everything to fall into place. So time does work in his favor, but remember when I told you, how is someone supposed to fight back against Vecna's cult? This is how.
Because those plans are long and slow, it gives more chances to clever adventurer to notice the pattern and ruin it.
And somehow, despite the secrecy, Vecna's plans always seem to fall apart. He was backstabbed by his most trusted general, and in the official lore, he got his ass whooped by adventurers something like 4 times already. But let's say that he does manage to complete his goal and rewrite reality with himself at the center. Other gods would be imprisoned, but the life of the average person wouldn't change much. They would just change who they worship. Or maybe that's what he wants me to think. Like and subscribe, please. Let's talk about the most iconic organization in all of D&D, the Cult of the Dragon. At first glance, worshipping dragons sounds like a bad idea, because dragons are not exactly known to be humble, emotionally available, or respectful of property rights. But the Cult of the Dragon looked at one of the most dangerous creatures in the game and said, interesting, what if we made it worse? They believed in a prophecy that said that undead dragons would rule the world. Basically, you take a dragon, one of the most dangerous creatures in the game, and you make it the Lich, also one of the most dangerous creatures in the game. And by combining them, you get what scholars call a fucking problem. After that, the cultists just had to hope that the dragons would believe in trickle-down economics and reward them with a position of power, which is certainly a choice, because let's create immortal dragon tyrants and hope they're grateful is not something I would bet my retirement on. But later versions of the cult shifted focus, and instead of becoming the servants of undead dragons, they decided to release Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon goddess of greed, tyranny, and destruction. So their end goal actually kinda stayed the same. The world will belong to dragons. In the D&D lore, the Cult of the Dragon have wealthy backers across all regions, and you might be thinking, why would anyone join that cult? Because of the damn prophecy. From the cult's perspective, it makes sense. If you genuinely believe the dragons will come and rule the world, then helping them early is a pretty good survival strategy. When they take over, you probably want to be remembered as loyal servant rather than crispy example. So, how do we defeat this cult? Well, more on that in a second. First, let's take a look on how to use them. For the DM, the Cult of the Dragon is one of the best level 1 to 20 villain, because they can begin as a local mystery and progressively evolve into a massive conspiracy. And because the main fuel of the cult is fear, you can run them like an authoritarian regime where many collaborators hate what they're doing, but they fear the consequences of disobedience even more. To add to the realism, there's also the fact that dragons are powerful, and they can promise wealth or positions of power to those who aid them. Now, whether they deliver on that promise is another question entirely. To run this cult, start with a small clue. For example, a shipment has gone missing. Then, you let each victory reveal the bigger conspiracy. The party tries to understand what was in the shipment, but all the witnesses have been murdered and the evidence has been erased. Eventually, they learn that it contained an ancient artifact, a dragon mask. But by the time they learned that those 5 masks are the key to freeing Tiamat, the cult got their hands on 3 more. And that's when the endgame starts. Tiamat's influence is growing and the dragons start pouring in. Now only 1 mask stands in between the heroes and the freedom of the evil goddess. So, as I said earlier, how do you defeat them? Well, it's hard. It's hard because Tiamat's cult solves Demogorgon's biggest problem. It is well organized.
I'm better! I am better!
Unlike Demogorgon, they don't risk murdering their own high priest because somebody looked at an idol for too long, which puts them ahead of a shocking amount of D&D cults. But they are only number 3 on this list because the key to their downfall lies in the nature of dragons. They are greedy. They want servants, they want worship, they want kingdoms kneeling under their claws. And fortunately, or unfortunately, people cannot mine gold, build temples, or scream compliments at you if they're dead. This means that there is still room for resistance and rebellion, especially when you consider that people are in this cult out of greed or out of fear, rarely from true devotion. So they can be pressured into divulging key information. Tiamat has been kicked out of the material plane once before. It took the entire armies of the Sword Coast, but it can happen again. At number 2, we descend into the 9 hells with the cult of Asmodeus. Unlike a demon cult, which is usually pretty easy to spot because at some point someone starts murdering everybody, the cult of the Lord of Hell can look like a perfectly normal charity, helping the poor, funding public works and supporting local businesses, and somehow owning your soul by the end of the fiscal year. Because Asmodeus is the ruler of the 9 hells, the lord of all devils, and a master of tyranny, temptation, and contracts. Which means that his cult is not built on bloodshed, but on paperwork. And that is so much worse. The goal of the Asmodeus cult is simple: absolute control. Asmodeus views the material plane as a farm, and humans as the cattle. He wants civilization, just one he fully controls, so he can harvest as many souls as possible. Because every soul that he can squeeze out of there is reborn in hell as a devil, which he can then use in his endless war against the abyss.
And this cult is the one that I hate facing the most as a player. I'll explain why later. First, let's talk about the structure of the cult.
Members of the cult can be anyone, from nobles to commoners, and most of them do not see themselves as villains. And of course they wouldn't. A famine hits the city, and the cult provides food. A kingdom is losing the war, and the cult provides weapons. All it costs is a signature. They don't need to convince people to worship evil on day one. They just need to convince them to accept help. And slowly but surely, they begin to exert so much influence that their word is law. This is what makes them terrifying, because you can fireball a room full of cultists. But what do you do when the mayor is evil, but every single evil thing he did was technically approved by the council? The cult basically makes heroism illegal. Fighting them will make your players look like criminals. What's that? You stole a devil contract. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to charge you with theft. Oh, you killed a devil disguised as a legal advisor? Well, that's just murder of a respectable public servant. How dare you? The players will know they're in the right, but it doesn't matter if they can't prove it, and they won't be able to prove it, because devils make the law. For a DM, the cult of Asmodeus is amazing because it lets you run evil as something intelligent and socially acceptable. This is a cult where they invite the heroes to dinner, thanking them for protecting the city. Then they will politely explain that if they keep investigating, innocent people will suffer consequences which are, tragically, completely legal. They should always give the players a choice, because that's the devil's favorite weapon. The kind of choice where every option costs something. Maybe they can expose the devil, but doing so would damn hundreds of people who signed their soul away for survival. Maybe they can kill the cult leader, but that would trigger a clause of a contract where all the souls of the orphanage would be transferred to a pit fiend. Speaking of selling your soul, I signed a contract with Hasbro, and in exchange, Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt got released on D&D Beyond. So I'm going to take 30 seconds to talk about the book, because it took me years to write, and goddammit if I don't love it. Steinhardt's Guide fuses Lovecraftian horror with Soulsborne violence to unleash an absolutely monstrous book on your D&D table. At launch, it was the most funded D&D book ever. With the D&D Beyond player pack, there's 7 new subclasses, from the Lightning Vessel Barbarian to the Torturer Ranger. A subclass so violent, I cannot talk about it on video because it will get it demonetized. I'm still surprised the people at D&D Beyond were okay with it. Blows my mind. To help you fight, we've also added new firearm rules and my favorite, trick weapons, which are weapons which transform in the middle of battle to help you slay beasts more effectively. Join the hunt today. And let me be real with you for a minute. They told me that if the player pack does well enough, they will bring the rest of the book, which I would love to see on D&D Beyond. So tell your friends, tell everyone, and go get that book. Back to the video. To use this cult,
Start small.
a judge keeps making strange rulings, releasing violent criminals. And soon after, the harvest got burnt, threatening the city with famine. Then let the players understand that this is not random. This always worsening situation is connected by a network of people who are all too compromised to back out.
And when the time comes for your players to confront the devils pulling the strings, make them gloat. Make them so arrogant that your players will want to strangle you. You can do so by saying things like,
We never forced anyone to sign those contracts.
and they're technically right, or,
The city is safer under our protection.
and they will also be right. Or even,
Without us, the kingdom will collapse.
and the really awful part is that by the time the campaign reaches that point, they're right about that too. Trust me on this, your players will hate them. With that being said, despite being able to create literal hell on earth, there's a reason Asmodeus is only number 2. Even though all the forces of hell obey him, including archdevils like Zariel, which are legendary fights of their own, he views the material plane as a farm, which means that he won't burn it down because he needs the souls. So even though it's hell, people still exist, which means resistance is still possible. But that's not the case for number 1. But before that, couple of honorable mentions.
Honorable mention.
First, the Cult of the Elder Brain, which is basically the cult that you see in Baldur's Gate 3. They are incredibly lethal with long-term planning and nasty ambitions, but they're also not really a cult. Don't get me wrong, they do rally against a singular being, the Elder Brain, but they're also cheating. They don't need to recruit anyone because they have tadpoles, which allow them perfect mind control. The Cult of the Absolute is only a cult from the outside. Mechanically, it's closer to a hive mind wearing the skin of a religion. But if you do consider them to be a cult, then I would easily put them at number 1 or 2 on this list. The other honorable mention is the Cult of Orcus, the demon prince of undeath. As his name suggests, he rules over the undead. But if left to his own devices,
Stop! Don't do it! That button launches all of our nuclear missiles.
Well, then which button gets me a latte?
he will kill everything and everyone to obtain his goal of a dead and stagnant world where only the undead remain under his rule. But this cult is also not exactly a cult, because it has very few alive members. Yes, he does have some necromancers and some death priests, but his main force lies in his army of undead minions. And since all of the undead are controlled by him, it's more of a one-man army than an actual cult. If you did consider it a cult though, it would easily snatch the number 3 spot. Back to the video. And finally, at number 1, we have the cult of Tharizdun. First, a bit of context on Tharizdun. He is the god of eternal darkness, madness, and entropy. In Dragon Magazine, Tharizdun is listed only as an intermediate god, which I find very funny, because all the other gods in D&D, gods that spend their time fighting, bickering, or slipping with each other, they all came together and said, okay, we need to put this thing in cosmic jail. And they locked him outside of reality and hoped that no one would find the key. To me, that does not sound like an intermediate threat. And the worst part in all of this is that even though he's imprisoned outside of reality, Tharizdun is still active. He should not be able to touch reality, let alone create a cult, and yet he does. The cult of Tharizdun does not spread like a normal cult, because most of his followers do not even know that they're worshipping him, which is such a ridiculous advantage. Because if you worship Asmodeus, at some point someone is going to find the contracts. If you worship Demogorgon, the trail of screaming bodies tends to give the game away. But Tharizdun? His cult can hide behind other religions. That being said, some worship him as the Elder Elemental Eye, believing that they're serving some ancient elemental god. Others believe they're worshipping a god of light, knowledge, or even justice. But the trick is, Tharizdun does not need them to understand who he truly is. A priest might genuinely believe that they're serving a god of mercy, but every merciful act they perform slowly destroys the community around them. Maybe he convinces people that life is suffering. So the kindest thing you can do is to help people detach from reality. At first, that sounds almost peaceful. Then, his followers stop caring about their families. Then, they stop eating. Then one day, the whole village silently walks off into the sea, never to be seen again. And none of them said the name Tharizdun even once. This is how the cult works in the game. And if you think that's scary, well, strap in for what's to come. But first, a couple of things you must know about his cult.
The players should not be finding a priest saying, "Welcome everyone to the annual meeting of Tharizdun." Because first of all, that would be a very short meeting because half of the crowd would stab their own eyes out because this god is an eldritch horror beyond imagination. And second, because Tharizdun is scarier when he's not fully explained. They should find normal cults, normal temples, normal religions, which all feel ever slightly off. For a DM, the best way to use Tharizdun is to make it feel like the campaign has been infected, and that as it progresses, reality starts showing symptoms of decay.
I like to run it as a campaign where the players think that they are dealing with multiple unrelated villains.
Session 1. They stop a bunch of elemental cultists of fire, but something feels off. A few stars are no longer visible in the night sky. A few sessions later, the party investigates a temple of light trying to find an answer, but find nothing. Then the moon disappears, and no one remembers it.
By that point, the party finds warriors who all have the same spiral carved into their flesh.
On the surface, none of these groups look connected. They might even hate each other. But underneath, they're all being pushed towards the same goal, to end suffering. An ideal that, when pushed to its extreme, means erasing all of existence.
These were never separate cults.
They were different faces worn by the same thing chained outside of reality. And now, they need to hurry.
Because somewhere, a god stopped answering, and all of his followers and temples vanished.
And if another chain is loosened, if Tharizdun even gets another fraction of himself through the cracks, things will simply cease to be. And that is why the cult of Tharizdun is the most dangerous cult in D&D. Because if he is freed, it's like the Thanos snap. Except that everyone and everything is wiped out. And there is no going back in time to fix this mistake, because time itself is also gone. There is just nothing. Arrivedere.